start lying down on my back with a little pillow underneath my back for a little chest opening, right? If you don't have this is a little pillow made exactly for this purpose, but if you don't have one of these, you can certainly take a blanket and roll it up and make something that looks pretty much exactly like that. So if you have a blanket handy, do that. If you prefer just to lie down on your back, that's also fine. We will use a strap at some point today, and some yoga blocks might come in handy as well. So if you have those nearby, you'll be able to use them for whichever part of this practice you like. So once we get, I'm going to lay down this way, but once we get laying down, you can decide how you want your legs to be arranged. I'll give you a couple options. Now, if you're using something that's kind of soft, like a little pranayama pillow like this, or like a rolled up blanket, you can have that pretty much almost all the way down your back. But if you're using a yoga block, you want that way up high so that it's just under the shoulder blades. So something soft will be okay. It won't abuse your spine generally, so it can come down a little bit lower. I like mine to go to about the base of my rib cage. If you're using something like this under your back, because it's quite firm and the edge is kind of a little bit, feels a little sharper, you don't necessarily want that to be poking into the spine. So up under your shoulder blade, so it's quite high up the chest, is going to work. Clearly it's going to go underneath you, but in any case, that'll work a little better. And then just put something under your head. If you want your head held a little bit higher, you can put a blanket on top of whatever you're using to hold your head a little higher, or like the blocks you can tilt up. All right, so the first option with the legs would be to let them both stretch out and just hang out straight. That's usually my preference, but sometimes it feels nice to put the feet together. You can have the knees open, or you could let the legs rest, either feet a little wide and the knees resting toward each other, or just simply allow the legs to kind of find a place where they hold themselves up pretty easily. So any of these will work. You just want to pick the version of this that seems the best for you. Now, if I take my arm out wide, it tends to get a little bit bigger pull through the big chest muscle, the pectoralis major, which sews, goes from breastbone all the way out to the arm bone. What I am interested in is getting the pectoralis minor, because that's the muscle that pulls my arm bone forward and is really supposed to help stabilize my arm in the socket of my shoulder. So to do that, it's better if I keep my arms a little closer in, so that the chest muscle, the big chest muscle, is able to relax, and I really just get into this little stabilizer area of the shoulder. So I let my arms kind of just find that position they would have in mountain pose. And then I might take a little occasional readjustment here and there to keep everything releasing and opening up in a happy way. Or try to let yourself relax. Once you've gotten your body positioned where you think it feels pretty good, then notice your breath. To the degree possible, try to let yourself breathe nice and deep into your diaphragm. So we're going to stay for about another 30 seconds or so. It's like 4 or 5 deep breaths. And hopefully you've kind of felt a little bit of a shift and things have started to open up a little. At least that's kind of what I was waiting for. It's a feeling of things finally sort of letting go. So now I'm going to take myself off of this pillow by just kind of rolling to the side and sliding it out. And then I'm going to set that off to the side and come back onto my back for a moment. And this is just so I can kind of appreciate the feeling of what's left after I come off of that little pillow. Now, depending on what I've had under my back, sometimes if the object is quite firm, like blocks or like these little pillows, that is quite an impression. Sort of feels like my upper back spreads out a little wider, my shoulders feel wider. I think that's really interesting. When I use something really soft, like a blanket, it's a little more localized. Like the sensation is more of an impression left behind by the block, or by the blanket, rather. So just notice what's true for you. And I'm doing this little thing where I lift my arms up and rock back and forth just so I can get a little sense of roundness. When I bring my shoulder blades forward like that, it gives my upper back a sort of smoother rock. So I can rock side to side and just kind of get all that muscle area where the object was kind of released. Okay, so we're going to do a little twist while we're here. We'll probably come back and do another twist, but this one we're going to start with a motion, and then we're going to wind up in a landing position. So I'm going to have a blanket handy in case I want that at the end to try to figure out which blanket's on the top of this mountain of blankets. Okay, so I'm going to put that off so that it's handy. Hopefully you guys can still see me. And then I'll have it for when I'm ready. But first, I'm going to float my knees up into my chest. Now, I'm going to keep the knees for this motion right about level with my pelvis until I get to the side. I want to keep my upper back nice and stable, so I'm going to kind of stabilize my shoulders, and I'm going to keep my elbows bent so I can kind of press down a little bit into my elbows. So I'm going to bring the legs over to my right side, curl them in, go back all the way across that top rim of my pelvis, and then come back to the left side, curl them in. So about level with the pelvis as I move. And then there's a little curl there at the end. I'm just going back and forth. So this warms up the obliques. If it's too intense, don't do the little curl part. Just go back and forth. Hopefully it's not too crazy. Now when I do this, I travel for some reason. So I move down my mat. I haven't quite figured it out. Exactly why I can't maintain a position on the mat. But in any case. I'm gonna do 2 more. I'm inviting you to do it with me. Assuming you're willing to go along with this. Okay, so now that I'm back in the center, I'm gonna take myself over to the right, and I'm gonna add a blanket to my world here. So I'm just gonna put a folded blanket on the bottom so that I can kind of take the top leg, which in this case is going to be my left leg, and drape it over the top. I want like a little bit of a lift so that I've got a little height here. Because this, I'm going to try to twist myself a little deeper into. So I'm going to try to get this left arm to go all the way out and my left hip to kind of move away from my left armpit. And now I've got a big stretch in the chest muscle, and I've got quite a good stretch across this outer hip. And so I was kind of saving the chest stretch for this movement. Take nice deep breaths, yogis. one more big breath. And then we're going to come on back to the center. All right, and then before I do the other side, I just want to take a moment and check it out. So when I stretch my legs out, I would swear to you that my left leg is a little tiny bit longer, right? There's just a sense of sort of ease on the left side. If I stay here long enough, that'll shift and everything kind of neutralizes. But let's take a moment after and do the other side. So I'm going to scooch a little bit towards the center here, and then I'm going to do the other side. And we'll see at the end if everything kind of comes back to center. Okay, so again, I'm going to try to kind of build up a little bit of a ledge that I can rest my legs on so that I can work a little bit more into this twist. I'm kind of going for a pretty good sensation of stretch here with this guy. You might want to do it a little softer, a little more gentle. And that's fine. Feels kind of nice to me to get a little deeper stretch into these areas, especially since I've got some support and I'm not hanging out in space here. My shoulders resting on the floor. My legs are resting over the blankets. I've got good support. I'm not going to do anything too tricky. I find myself, if I'm kind of hanging out in space, it's a little trickier for me to maintain the stability in my joints, but if everything's resting on a surface, it's a little easier. Just taking big deep breaths. Big inhale, and then I'm going to come back by bringing that leg back, so everything kind of comes back together. And then once I'm here, I can see, is it a little more even? And it is. And again, if I lay here long enough, it'll probably return to its natural state. But right now, I'm sort of enjoying the feeling of it being a little bit longer, so we're going to go with it. All right, for now, we're going to come to a seated position. Now, I'm going to take my time doing that. I'm encouraging you to take your time doing that. What is going to happen is we're going to meet up in a seated position in about 30 seconds or so. Some people like to rock themselves up, but I like to be a little more deliberate, a little bit slower, and take my time coming on up here. All right. Now I'm gonna do some little neck things, and I'm gonna do some little seated cat-cow things, and then we'll do some stuff kneeling. We'll kind of take that up another notch. So get my clothes on straight first. But if you, when you're sitting cross-legged, if it's better to sit up on the edge of a blanket or to sit up on a pillow or something, do that. So you give yourself whatever comfortable seat you need. You just want to make sure your spine can mostly just kind of hang out neutral. Doesn't feel like you're rounding back or being pushed forward, right? And just find that kind of space where your spine feels pretty even. So we're going to drop the chin, and I don't want to round over, right? So I'm going to try to get my shoulders to stay relatively neutral, and I'm going to keep my, I've got the hiccups, I'm sorry. Hopefully they'll go away in a second. But I'm going to keep my back relatively tall and my shoulders relatively neutral, and so my chin kind of hangs out. And then I'm just for a moment just noticing, does it feel like either side of my neck, left or right, is a little bit tighter, just by dropping my chin forward. So then I'm going to roll the head. So I'm going to go up and over one shoulder, come back, and up and over the other shoulder. So already I know a little bit more information about what's going on. Okay, so I just want to feel as I roll from one side to the other, where are the tight places? And just kind of make a little note of those. Well, hello there. All right, so now I have discovered pretty well that the right side of my neck is a little bit tighter, and I've got two different spots. One that's kind of coming up the back, and one a little bit more towards the side. So I'm gonna start with this area in the back. So I'm gonna start with my right side. I'm gonna take my head over to the left, and I'm gonna sort of let my forehead drop forward like it's gonna move towards my knee. And then I'm gonna take my right shoulder blade and draw it down my back and even reach back behind me to sort of allow me to stretch that muscle a little bit more. So the muscle that's probably the culprit here is one of the muscles that stabilizes the skull on the neck. It's the levator scapulae. Oh. And so I'm just sort of noticing that it attaches the top of my shoulder blade to my skull. And it's getting a little softer, and I'm starting to feel things kind of release. So I'm going to take my arm back out of there, and just for a couple more breaths, let my head rest into this shape. Okay, so I'm going to bring my head back to the center, and then I'm just going to notice if there's a difference. And there is. There's a little bit of a difference. So since I did that muscle on the right side, I'm going to do that muscle on the left side. So I'm going to drop my chin, kind of take my head over to the right, and then I'm going to find that muscle again. So I'm going to let my forehead go towards the knee, sort of forward and out, and then I'm going to take this shoulder blade down and back and reach back with my arm. Sometimes it takes a second for me to get that a little bit more isolated. The neck is all connected, you guys. We can't isolate individual muscles, but we can get closer. And this one's not as tight, so the sensation kind of dissipates relatively quickly on this side. Just notice what's true for your body. Ooh. Now, if you've got a slightly different area, just like adjust your head until you find the stretch for yourself, right? Okay, so I'm going to take 2 more breaths. Now, you may want to stay a little longer if yours is still quite sensitive. So I'm going to start with just bringing my hand back, and then I'm going to get my chin to the center, my head to the center, and then just see how that went. So, there's still a little bit of tightness in the front part of my shoulder, but I'm going to work with that with some movement. So we're going to take the shoulders up, around, and back, up, around, and back. Now, if you want to continue with your neck, you can do that instead. If this is feeling good, stay with this. And I'm trying to move my shoulder blades, so I'm pushing the shoulder blades forward, bringing them up and pushing them back, and then bringing them back down, okay? Do that one more time, and then we're gonna just reverse that. We're gonna go together, up, forward, and down. Now, sometimes doing this will make me yawn or make other, like sometimes I'll even find myself salivating. And that is an indication that I was cutting off some love to some nerves. And finally that is being released, and so there's this kind of response in the body. So if you find yourself yawning, or it can be anything. It can be feeling like you want to smack your lips or a little salivation, and those are all indications that we're releasing some pressure from the neck, which is not so bad. All right, y'all. So we're gonna take just a few little moments to do these little seated cows, and we're gonna kind of do it like a circle in a moment. And then we'll come to all fours and do them again so we can hit them twice. If being up on all fours isn't your jam, then you can stay with these for a little bit or come up to a standing position instead. So basically I'm just starting with back and forth, and I'm letting my pelvis tilt forward, and then I'm tilting my pelvis back, and the spine is adjusting, okay? So then we're gonna add a circular motion to this. So I'm gonna take my ribs to the right, kind of wrap them around the back, take them over to the left, bring them forward. The pelvis is following me with, I'm concentrating on my ribs, but my pelvis is coming too. So the pelvis goes forward, ribs to the side, pelvis goes back, ribs to the side, pelvis goes forward. One more time in that direction. And it doesn't have to be a big movement to actually feel big. So I'm going to stop here in the center. I'm going to switch which leg is on top. Now that's odd, and if it doesn't work for your knees, that's okay to stay the same. And then I'm going to go the other direction. So ribs to the right, pelvis to the center, ribs to the left, pelvis to the back. Okay? And just move it through these motions. So I'm going to do one more. I'm feeling some tightness right between here and the right side of my waist. So I'm going to slow that down until I get around it. All right. So some movement there. We're going to come up to all fours. Now we're going to, once we get onto all fours, we're going to do some cat shapes. We're going to do a little spinal balance. We're going to do a lunge. So if you would like, you can take something soft and put it underneath your knees, especially if your floor is wooden or otherwise relatively firm. You can put a little padding underneath your knees. Okay. If you use padding, make sure you kind of smooth it out so there's not any wrinkles that are going to annoy the edge of your patella or anything like that. So we're going to just come back to these little cat shapes a couple rounds, just in case we didn't quite get to all the edges because of resistance from the floor. Okay. So then we're going to find a neutral space. We're going to take the right leg back behind and then the left arm out in front. We're just going to stretch between those two. Now hug in a bit through the navel. Good. One more breath. Stretch a little longer. Beautiful. And then we're going to bring the arm down, the knee down. Give yourself a moment just to feel. I like to feel the difference when I've done one side, but I haven't done the other. So then we'll take the leg and the arm, and again, curl up through the navel and stretch between those 2 points. I'm going to try a slightly different angle, reach, and then we'll come down. Okay. Oh, so everything feels kind of good. And I'm going to bring my right leg forward. Now, I'm going to grab a couple of yoga blocks because I find them useful. If you don't have yoga blocks, Tupperware containers will work, or books, or a couple pots and pans, you know, as even in height as you can find. Yoga blocks are not that expensive, generally speaking, and they're a nice investment if you have the means, but if not, get what you got. So I'm bringing my hip forward until I feel something kind of stretching there on the front of my left hip, and then I'm just backing off of that for a second. I'm going to do that about 3 more times, just kind of bringing the hip forward and then backing off. So I like having the stability of the blocks so that I have something to lean into. Okay. Now I'm going to find a spot that's just at the beginning of being able to feel it. And then I'm going to bring my torso up a little higher so that there's a little bit more kind of a back bendy shape to this. It pulls on the same muscle, but a little bit higher up the muscle. And I don't want to go too far, so you just go to the place where you feel sensation. And if that gets softer, then you can surf in a little bit deeper. With yoga poses, it's always best to start right at the beginning where you just feel it and then see how it goes. So now I'm gonna fold over my legs, or over my front leg, I guess. And then I'm gonna back my hips up until my front leg is mostly straight, okay? So I feel this in my hamstring, the muscles on the back of this thigh. And again, I don't want to go for such a sharp sensation that it feels like I'm doing damage. I just want to feel the beginning place here. All right, so I'm going to move my hips back to a more neutral place. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn a little bit. So I'm taking this leg and bringing it a bit to the side so that when I stand up on my legs, I'm in a more of a warrior two shape. So this leg is going forward and this knee is kind of turned to match my hip. So I'm going to put my elbow on my thigh here and stretch so that I've got this kind of side angle shape, and I can lean into that as much as it feels good to lean into it. One more breath here, and then I'm going to turn this into the gate. So I'm going to leave my arm kind of in this position, but I'm going to straighten out this leg. Now you can turn the leg in, you can lift the toes up. I'm just going to kind of leave my toes where they are and put a block underneath my hand on the side. And then with this leg a little straighter, as I fold over, I get slightly different sensations. Okay, a little bit rounder, a little bit more spine and side waist stretch. All right, one more breath. Now, we've been on this knee for quite a while, so we're going to come out slow. And it might be nice to take that leg in the air and give it a little bit of a shimmy. Now I'm going to turn all the way around because I think it's a little easier to see this if I'm kind of open to the camera situation, but you can stay where you are and do the other leg. Okay, so I'm going to bring my left foot forward, and this is the beginning of my lunge position here. So I'm going to find my way into this a little bit more stable place and go a little bit forward and a little bit back. And I'm just going to the point where I feel something quite interesting and then backing off, okay? So to the point where I feel something and backing off. And I'm letting myself explore, like, what happens if I go a little bit farther? Okay. So now I'm going to find that lunge. I've got some information. I'm going to find the lunge in this more upright position, if I can find myself in a stable place. I'm going to ease this hip forward, but just enough to feel that sensation. Take one more breath here. And then we're going to go for this hamstring stretch. So I'm going to fold over and see how far into straight that leg will go. So then we're going to back off of there and come around to this kind of kneeling warrior two position, right on. So I've kind of adjusted, so I've turned my hips a bit to the side instead of forward. I'm going to put my elbow on this thigh, and I'm interested in stretching this kind of front pocket area. The same place I was stretching with the lunge, it's just now I'm doing it at a different angle and it feels different. And again, I can lean that direction and take it a little deeper towards this shape. You know, like this whole thing drops towards the center if I want to add on to it, and I back off if I want to take away. Two more breaths here. And just feel what's going on in your body. There's a little wobbliness in mine. And then we're going to back off this leg a little bit, and I'm going to turn this into the gate. So again, I'm going to use a block on the back side of this. It's a little easier, a little more stable. And then allow myself to sort of side bend a bit more. So now I feel this more on the side of my waist instead of in the front of my hip. That might not be true for you. It is for me. Two more breaths. And then we're going to come out of here. And again, we've been on this knee for a bit. So once you have your leg back on the ground, you can give this guy a little bit of movement or a little shake out. All right. So we're going to meet up in a seated position. I'm going to need this blanket in a different way, so I'm going to kind of get it out from underneath my legs here. Oh. All right. So I have a gajillion yoga props all down here in my living room, largely because of teacher training, but I'm also going to try to make a video today about yoga props and why you might want one or another for your own personal practice. And if I get that done, I can put some of these away. So right now I'm seated in a V shape, okay? So the V shape is where we're going to start collectively, and then these props might come in handy. Couple blocks and a strap might come in handy, along with some other soft things if you've got it. I'm going to use a blanket underneath my knees. There's a couple reasons I do this. The first is because I tend to hyperextend at my knee joint, and that's uncomfortable and creates a little bit of injury. And then the second is because it does allow my pelvis to come forward a little bit more. And if you generally, when you sit with your legs out in a V, if your pelvis generally leans back, you have two kind of strategies. Strategy one is to bend at the knee a little bit, so you could use a blanket that way. Strategy two is to elevate the pelvis, so you could sit up on a blanket so that your pelvis is higher up. Either one will generally help you bring your pelvis forward a little bit. Now, this is a genetic situation, so you're only going to get so far, but you do your best, right on? Now, you don't have to have your legs as far apart as they will go. It can be more of a kind of medium ground. I like somewhere near the edge, but not at the edge there. And then we're going to take one leg and bend the knee. You get to decide which one. So I'm going to bend my right knee first and go over my left leg, okay? So the right knee is bent, and I'm going to turn towards my left leg and make a little adjustment, and then I'm going to fold. Now, this is where the strap comes in handy, because if you can reach your foot, then you can just hold onto your foot. If you can't reach your foot, then you're going to wrap the strap around it. I'm going to hold the strap in each hand. I'm going to give myself like one little wrap, okay? Because essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to treat the strap like a gas pedal. And I'm going to push into it and pull on it a little bit, give it a little resistance. So I'm bending my knee slightly. I'm going to press down on the strap a little bit and pull so that I'm getting a little bit more resistance. And I'm going to use this energy to try to engage my quads. So by doing that, so the quadriceps are the muscles on the top of the thigh here. So I'm going to engage those muscles. So I'm trying to lift my kneecap up toward my hip. And those muscles, because they're reciprocal with the muscles on the back, will help those muscles let go. Okay, so engaging the quads, trying to lift your kneecap, will let your back of your thigh soften a bit. And so we're trying to use that relationship here to get a little bit more length in this forward bend. So rather than hunching my back, I'm trying to bring my breastbone forward. I'm trying to keep the back of my neck nice and long. I'm moving into this pose like I'm shooting outward rather than trying to squish forward. Okay, so if your pose looks like this, where you're seated upright and you're still doing all of this engagement, that's still the pose. It doesn't matter how far forward you go. It just happens to be my superpower is folding forward. I can't back bend at all, but I can forward bend. So we're gonna take 2 more big breaths here. And then we're gonna come out of here. So we're doing similar things to what we were doing kneeling. We're just, now we've shifted the relationship a little bit with the hip, right? Now the hip, instead of being open, is now kind of collecting toward itself. So we're flexing at the hip rather than extending. Okay, so now I'm gonna turn a little more to the side, okay? Same leg arrangement. It's just now I wanna come back to my gate pose and stretch sideways, okay? Now you can do this with your arm, and sometimes I find that really helpful. You can also take this arm out of the game if for some reason we've got some trouble. But if you're willing to do this, we're gonna do an arm movement. So we're gonna start by trying to stretch this arm over the head and then find the right position in your back. So it's not too much and not too little. I like to use my arm here for a little bit of support. I've also got this leg really turned on. I'm spreading my toes out, I'm lifting my kneecap, I've got that little bit of a bend. So there's some muscle that I'm working into with my elbow. Okay, so now I'm gonna take this arm and sweep it all the way down, okay? Now with it all the way down, I'm gonna draw my shoulder blade into my back a little bit. That makes my whole arm bone turn, so my pinky finger is a little bit lower and my index finger and thumb are a little bit up. I'm gonna keep that relationship and sweep the arm up, see how far it wants to go, and then I'm gonna sweep it back. So I'm not really moving the arm bone, or the relationship between the arm bones. I'm moving the whole arm bone at the shoulder, and everything else stays in relationship, okay? All the littler bones. So reach it back, reach it up, so I'm stretching nice and big, reach it back, stretching big going that way. We're gonna take one more big sweep up over the ear, and one more sweep back, and then we're gonna use that one to help get us out of there. Okay, so then, ooh, see where that landed you. And for me, it's always a little asymmetrical feeling. Can you feel how the relationship of the shoulder, the neck, the spine, and the hip, all kind of working in that same shape? Okay, so there's a moment where I'll feel my spine kind of come back a little bit to neutral, and that's the moment where I'm ready to do the other side. If you're not there yet, take a couple more breaths. Usually for me it's about 30 seconds. Can be as long as 45 if I'm feeling a little dehydrated. Okay, so I've got long leg, bent leg, opposite sides. First thing I'm gonna do is turn. So I literally picked up my bone and brought my hip bone back, okay? So this hip is now farther back than this hip. And then I'm gonna fold over this leg. And again, if you can hold your foot, you can just do it that way, or you can do this whole strap situation. And then I'm gonna really engage and lift. Now it takes me, I have to really concentrate to pick up my kneecap, right? I think I'm engaging those muscles, but really I'm not lifting enough. So as soon as I can get that kneecap feeling, then I know I'm really engaging all of my quads. So see if you can get that feeling of lifting your kneecap and then fold into however far you fold. Bring the breastbone out, bring the back of your skull out, so everything is lengthening front side and back side. And it's wherever we landed is where we landed. And already my quads have let go of my kneecap, so I'm re-engaging those. So I've got a little bit more space. If I don't watch those quads, they let go. They stop doing their job. They're like teenagers. Okay, I hope I might be disparaging. I should say I was like me as a teenager. Lack of supervision meant I did what I wanted. 2 more breaths. Okay, so we're gonna let go. I'm gonna come up. I'm gonna come back to that re-engagement, but first I'm gonna broaden this whole situation out. Okay, so now we're gonna do the gate pose. So again, I'm gonna put my elbow on my thigh. You might build up a little block tower for yourself. Again, I'm gonna engage these muscles. Now I'm not gonna work with the resistance of the strap, but you could. I'm just gonna try to use the muscle to press my leg and my elbow together. And then I'm gonna let this arm stretch over. Okay, so that's the first thing, is just find the right amount of positioning in my spine. Then I'm gonna sweep this arm back. So I'm gonna mostly keep the spine neutral, Once I get the arm bone position, so my shoulder blade is in the center of my back, pinky finger down, thumb is up, I'm going to keep that relationship with the arm. Pinky finger still down, thumb is still up, okay? I'm just sweeping back and forth so that I can open up the tissue that lives around this shoulder. And mostly what I'm after are the little muscles that stabilize my arm bone in the socket. Because I stabilize the arm bone, that's what I'm going to start to reach. And there's other stuff that's happening here as well. So when I come to here, stretching into it gets all these other muscles along my side waist, and then stretching into that gives me some interesting stretches in the chest muscles, okay? Oh. So we're going to do that one more time. Use that stretch to help myself up. Oh, all right, yogis. Oh, that felt good. All right, hopefully it feels good to you. I need a moment to rinse out. Now we've done a bunch of stuff asymmetrically. We did one side then the other. When I do asymmetric work, and this is just a little note for with your home practice, you can try it on your own and see if you like it. I like to finish with a pose that's symmetric. So both sides even together as best I can. So I'm going to stick with these wider legs, but you could bring your feet together like a little butterfly, or you could put the legs closer together. That's up to you, okay? So now that my spine feels like it's pretty much neutral, I'm going to come back to this position, kind of get my sit bones out from under me, and then I'm going to fold forward. Now, again, I can do this with really active legs, and that's what I'm going to do for our purposes here today. Bend my knees slightly, lift my kneecaps. I'm going to reach out. I can grab my toes, so I will. Otherwise, you could use a strap. And then I'm going to lengthen, not just the front, so not just lifting my breastbone, but also lifting the back of my neck. So I'm lengthening both sides of my spine together. This prevents me from sticking my ribs out and thinking I'm getting taller. So it just makes me really concentrate on the length. So I'm doing more length than fold, right? I want more length than I am trying to fold forward. Again, some of us can fold forward, and some of us are back benders, and some of us are lucky to sit on the ground. and all of it is good. Wherever you land is okay. So I'm engaging my quads a little bit more. Again, they want to let go as soon as I stop paying attention to them. So I'm going to take 2 more breaths with a super action in my legs. Now, I'm going to let go of my toes. And with my exhale, I'm going to let everything get soft. And I'm going to take 2 breaths, just letting my back round here. It's a different sensation. Don't be pushy. And then I'm going to come on up. All right. It makes my back feel like it's still rounding that way. So yogis, we're going to do a little bit of stuff on our back and do a little bit of shoulder stuff, and then we'll relax. So I am going to put my head on this end because I think it's a little bit easier to see the shoulder work, and I have a little bit more room than I do on this end. So I'm going to set my blanket off to the side so that I can put it underneath me at the end, and then everything else I'm just going to get out of the way so that I have plenty of space to move. Okay. So then, if you want a little extra core work, coil yourself in and roll down as slow as you can. Try to get each bone to come down one at a time. If you hit a spot when you're rolling down and you kind of fall, that's the spot where your transverse abdominis just took over from your hip flexor. Hip flexors are super powerful muscles, and they'll give us most of the way there. But there's a last little segment that's all deep ab. So if you hit that segment and you fall, you can work with just that segment, just curling up and curling back down, curling up, curling back down, just through that segment to help build strength in those deeper muscles. Just a little side note for you. So the deep stabilizing muscles of the spine, like the transverse abdominis, it's a worthy thing to do to work with those and get them stronger. All right, so we're going to put the feet in a position where they feel like the legs are not going to fall apart necessarily. So if you need your feet a little wider so your knees lean into each other, that's also fine. Just find a spot where they kind of rest. So they're in kind of a bridge position, and we're going to stay with that position for now. So we're going to start with the arms pretty much just chest height, and you're going to grab an elbow. Okay, so whichever elbow you've got, like my right arm's a little more on top than the left, so I'm going to remember right arm is on top. Okay, so I'm going to lower these arms as close as I can to my chest, and I'm going to reach through the elbows, and then still reaching through my elbows, I'm going to take the arms all the way up over my head. Reach, 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 reach. I'm trying to stretch my arms away from me, and then come back. So keep stretching the arms away, keep stretching the arms away, keep stretching the arms away, and when you get to the bottom, you can't go any further. That's where we are. Okay, we're going to do that 3 more times. Stretch, 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 up over the head as far as they'll go. If they'll go all the way to the floor, great. If not, don't worry about it. Just go where they go. Come all the way back. Okay, 2 more. Stretch out. Oh. And I'm really concentrating as my arm bones move, I'm keep reaching out. So I'm trying to stretch the elbows away from the shoulder joint. Last one, elbows stretch away from the shoulder. Stretch, 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 stretch. And then come on back. Okay, now I'm going to relax my arms a little. Give each arm a little bit of a shake. And then I'm going to put my arms down, so now the left arm is on top. We're going to do the same thing, 4 of these. So reaching up, stretch over your head as far as it'll go. Then come back, keep reaching through the elbows, and as far as they'll come down towards your chest. Reach through the elbows, stretch overhead. Come back. Get 2 more, stretch. Back. Last round, stretch. Try to reach. Right here is where it's harder for me to get that reach. And against gravity, go in slow here. And then up against the gravity, push, 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 push. All the way back. All right. Rinse out your arms. All right, we got one more thing we're going to do before Shavasana. And I'm going to roll all the way onto my left side. So I'm going to put my left arm up and roll, and then see like how much support do I need for my head. And I think I can get away with a blanket. So if you needed a little bit more support, you could put a block there. Okay, so I'm going to put my blanket here. So I've got some support for my head. Might need a little bit more. Okay, and then once the head is supported, you're going to lay on your side. You can bend your knees like this so that you're a little bit more stable. Okay. So we're going to reach the arms out. This arm that's on top is the one that's going to move. I'm going to go over my head, stretch out as far as I can. You can let yourself roll into a twist if you've got the room to do that, and then bring the arm back. Okay, so we're just making sort of like a giant rainbow over the head, and then coming back to the center. Over the head. And back to the center. We're going to do it twice more. Over the head. And back to the center. And over the head. And back to the center. And then we have to do the other side. So first we're going to roll to the center point, which now my head is not in the most comfortable position, but it'll be okay in a minute. Feel the difference in the 2 shoulders. And then roll the opposite direction, and I'm gonna face away from you, but hopefully you'll still get this. Okay. So position your head. Make sure you like that. If you need a different amount of support, put that in there. And then the arm's gonna go overhead, stretch out, and come back. Overhead, stretch out, and come back. Overhead, stretch out. You might be letting yourself get into that twist a little bit. And come back 2 more. Overhead. And come back. This side's a little easier for me. It's not as salty. And then come on back. And then we're going to come back to the center, and I'm going to go ahead and take this blanket out because I know I don't need it once I get to the middle. Now you're going to put any head support you like to have. If you like to prop yourself up for Shavasana, you can do that. I'm gonna do a really simple thing, and it doesn't sound like it's gonna do anything, but friends, because the what we're working out in the back of the skull here is really just the layer of fascia right under the skin, even something this small can be useful. Now you can go bigger if you want to and make a whole head pod, but all I'm gonna do is take the end of my mat and I'm gonna cup it right along the edge of my skull. So I'm just gonna make a little bit of a cup that just catches these little ridges on the back of my skull. And it's really light, but it works, okay? And then if you want to put a blanket under there or something bigger, you can. I'm gonna use my blanket under my legs here. So I've got a little support under the thighs and this little cup of support under the back of my neck. And that's all I'm going to go with for today, but you can get a little bigger if you want. And then we're going to let the body relax. Double check with your forehead and the muscles around your eye and the muscles in your jaw, and just make sure everything is nice and soft. Yogis, we're not going to move yet, but do just take a moment and notice your breath again. Feel the rhythm of your breath moving into your body and out. Notice the parts of the body that adjust or get touched by the breath. so deep you can feel it all the way to your tiptoes. Let go with a big sigh. Then you can start to wiggle your fingers and toes. Ooh. Give yourself a big stretch. And then curl up in a little ball and give yourself a hug and maybe a little back massage for the road. Now, some people, again, like to rock up, so you can do that. I'm going to take my time. Ugh, I need to get this blanket out of here. And then we can say goodbye to each other with a nice, or at least end our class together, with a nice big breath. So I take a nice big inhale and a big deep sigh. And enjoy the rest of your day, yogis. Namaste.